Hi there, folks, and thank you so much for joining us for our 2020 Trust Talk series. So this is our last series of the year, so we're so excited to have you join us for the 2021 Strategic Business Planning panel. Behind me, I've got a few industry experts. I will let them introduce themselves in just a few moments, tell you who they are, a little bit about what they do. They will be covering tax planning, banking, and IT infrastructure for 2021. I think they're going to have a lot of great input to give you some tips and ideas on how to integrate and make things new for 2021 and just think of your processes. So we're so excited to have them. A few housekeeping items so you kind of know the flow for today's event. So in just a minute, I'll let them do their introductions. Then I'm going to kick us off with a little icebreaker question. This isn't really for you to just answer, just be thinking about during the event. And hopefully you'll have some questions trickle in for our Q&A at the end. As we're working through questions, if you have additional questions that you would like answered, feel free to just pop those up in the chat. Our team will be monitoring that and we'll be filtering those in as needed. So again, we're so excited to have you. If you can just kind of remain muted so our audio sounds good, so make sure everybody can hear. I think that will be great. So thank you so much, and I think we'll go ahead and get started. I am going to let Ryan introduce himself, and we'll just kind of work around the table. So Ryan, take it away.
Well, hello everybody. My name is Ryan Tisserand. I am the COO and owner of Standards IT. We are an IT as a service company. We are located in Edmond, Oklahoma. We provide IT services, infrastructure, analytics, project management to our clients, and we are very grateful to be here to talk about infrastructure and how we can help in the coming years.
And my name is Ryan Milam. I'm an IRS enrolled agent and tax strategist at Polston Tax. At Polston, we do tax resolution, tax planning, and accounting services. We're really excited to be here and partner with the Better Business Bureau to talk about 2021 and some things that we can do to plan for it better. So glad to be here.
My name is Nick Samaripas with Arvest Bank. Also very glad to be here and partnering with BBB on this. I'm an SVP and commercial loan manager with Arvest for the Northwest Oklahoma City commercial lending region. We provide all of the banking services from deposit and loans for consumers and commercial. I've got a background also of many years in banking as a former bank examiner and just in general bank management and business management as well. So just glad to be here.
Thank you so much, panelists, for your introductions. Just another point on the flow of the panel, we're going to give each panelist about 2 minutes to answer the question, and then we'll just kind of move along. So we know that they're ready and they've got their answers ready for you as well. So to kick us off with our icebreaker question, just be thinking about this during the panel. What is your business's biggest challenge when it comes to year-end strategic planning? If you've got some things that you want to ask our panelists during the Q&A at the end, we definitely encourage you to do that using the chat feature. Throughout the panel questions, I will also be adding those into the chat so you can kind of keep track of where we are. So to kick off with the first question, we're going to have each of our panel guests answer this question. As businesses are now in the throes of planning for the 2021 year, what changes must be made to make a business strategy successful in 2021? So I'm going to start with you, Nick, and then we'll move on to Ryan and Brian following you. So Nick, kick us off with that question.
I think for the changes to be made, most importantly is flexibility in many respects. Your business is already likely more flexible in how you are having to manage your locations, your customers, and your employees. And if you didn't already have a business contingency plan, you likely have one now. If you did have one, you've likely amended it and changed it and have added some flexibility to it that you didn't know you needed in the past. So many are able and are trying to save themselves as much financial flexibility as they can for the coming year, or are planning to add that financial flexibility in 2021. The saying of "that's the way we've always done it" is definitely gone in today's planning, and so I think that's a big change. It's different this year because 2020 has taught us that the unimaginable can happen, and you should incorporate imagination, I think, as a change to your planning. And for banking specifically, a term that's recently re-emerged in analysis is called the cash burn cycle. Banks have started looking at it more closely. Businesses have started calculating it for themselves as a monitoring tool. Instead of flexibility, it's more of a stability calculation. It's essentially your ability of how long you can keep the lights on, quite honestly. It's your current level of cash or your ability to generate cash and how long that cash can cover expenses or operating expenses. You can add in some stress scenarios that can add or subtract from that, but it may be a little stressful when you first calculate it because you're thinking, man, I maybe can't survive, but hopefully, I'm hoping for many, you calculate it and you can get some comfort that your business can continue to be operating well into the future.
Thank you so much, Nick. You will now hear me differentiate our Ryan and Ryan by Ryan with Holston and Ryan with Standards. So Ryan with Holston, I want to hear from you next. As businesses are now in the throes of 2021 planning, what changes should be made to make this strategy successful?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you, Nick. I think that Nick already shed some great information on this. And one thing is that Nick had mentioned is flexibility is a huge part of it. I don't know what's not different this year than any other year. We're all they've been thrown into this year with some challenges, and a lot of businesses have been able to get very creative to adapt to the current conditions of the industry that they're in. And from a tax perspective on this, a lot of times people in regards to their taxes, they're really big on just compliance, just making sure that they are compliant with the IRS or with the state. But it's really this time of the year, getting close to 2021 is a good time to be more proactive and maybe examine, maybe even if you've been structured a certain way for quite some time, it may be a good time to look at that structure. And on top of that, this year being an election year, there are a lot of things that could potentially change after the election in regards to taxes. And it may be a good time to meet with your accountant or CPA to make sure that you are aware of those changes. What is deductible and what is not deductible. And lastly, if there is any problems, that one of the silver linings that this year has given us is that in regards to tax, if you have any back taxes or any problems paying those back taxes, it's actually a really good time to get those taken care of and to get into a resolution, because the IRS is in a state that they are negotiating lower. They are able to be a little more lenient with people. So although this has been a challenging year and we want to get through this year, it has presented some new opportunities to maybe take care of some housekeeping items that have not been taken care of as well. So, thank you.
And you heard Ryan with Holston mention that this is an election year, and so he'll touch on a little bit later how that could affect your tax planning in 2021. So we're excited to hear from him on that. Brian, Standards IT, I'm sure it's been a big year for you. We have all gone very virtual. So tell me, what changes have you seen maybe businesses make, and what changes would you recommend making as we're headed into strategizing for 2021?
Well, thank you, Nick and Ryan. I agree on the flexibility. One of the ways that we try to help our clients with flexibility is project management being in an iterative fashion. The plan has changed so many times this year with folks because of everything going on. So being able to quickly adjust planning and strategizing how you're going to implement new ways of doing business has been successful for us in helping our clients. Remote employees has been a big shift this year in helping our clients move their staff to being able to work from home and other locations. Cloud applications have been a big shift this year. A lot of people had internal software, and that has been shifted to cloud applications. A lot of things that I've seen in the uncertainty is how to overstaff due to sick employees. We face some of that ourselves. Being able to continue to operate certain parts of your business because staff members are out due to sickness. And then cybersecurity is a big one because people are working remotely and they're not working from their office. There's less securities in place. So being aware of the threats that are out there and managing those have been a big focus for people in shifting to the 2021 year.
I'm really glad that you touched on that, because that's not something I have thought about. I don't run an organization, and so thinking about if we have an entire team knocked out because of sickness, how are we going to make sure that this business can keep going? So I'm excited to hear if you all have more to add to that later on. I think that's a great question, or a great point. So moving on to our next question, and kind of piggybacking off of what we had just talked about, digital is now a huge part of our daily business tactics, right? You can't do business hardly at all anymore without some form of digital. So what trends do you see businesses embracing today that maybe they didn't embrace? And I know that I've seen a lot of interesting things come out of this year. So what do you see businesses embracing, or something new that you might have heard of that maybe businesses could try implementing in 2021? And I'm just going to go ahead and let Ryan take off with this one, since digital is a huge part.
A lot of businesses are evaluating their legacy softwares that are installed on the premises of their businesses. Those are less capable of supporting businesses that are working remote. The biggest part of communications and the new softwares that people are implementing, like Teams and Zoom and other WebEx features that allow them to communicate with their staff and their clients remotely, has obviously been a big shift. But those are the largest shifts I've seen. Implementation and adoption of softwares have been the hardest part of what we've faced in working with our staff and our clients, is just teaching people how to use new tools, how to change the audio settings on their devices so that they can be heard, and turn them off when they need to be turned off. So some of the things that we have helped with is just the training and the education of the way people are having to do business now. So digital is definitely something we're involved in, and helping our clients understand the tools that they're being thrust into using.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and hear from the other two. If you have anything to add to that question, what trends do you see businesses embracing? And we'll go to Ryan with Polston.
Yes, so much like Ryan had mentioned, I think that just online in general, remote and online is kind of a theme for this year. Internally at Polston, we have gone remote, and a lot of other companies have done that, and that presents some challenges and communication issues when everyone is on their own separate island. It is a little harder to remain in good communication, but with proper tools and everything, it can still be done. But from another perspective, from the clients, and what I've seen is, some businesses have skyrocketed through COVID and really have almost grown too quickly, while others have suffered greatly. And some of those, what I've seen with some of my clients is, some of the ones who have been able to be flexible and have been able to pivot have been more successful. And so I've recently had a lot of retail store clients who previously maybe didn't even sell products online at all, break into an online marketplace, and some of those have really paid off. It's been a good way for them to break into markets that they previously were not able to break into in a very cheap way by doing it through the internet. And so, with that comes new, from my point of view, new tax issues whenever you're selling into other states that you haven't done business in before, calculating different types of sales tax in those states, and all of that. So, this, I would just say, all in all, online in general, from internally and externally, is something that I have seen, and it's presented a lot of new opportunities for a lot of businesses this year.
Great answer. I love that. And you're not wrong that a lot of people are finding new ways to be online. This presentation is a great example of that. Historically, this has always been an in-person event, so it took some learning on our team's end, but just like you said, with people in place and partners in our community, we were able to do that. So, great point there. Nick, do you have anything to add to that?
I do, and because of the industry of banking, it's a little bit different. What I personally see is coming down the track. Yes, we've all moved online and have shifted that way. For us, it's different. We're having to manage now teams separated, working remotely and things like that. Customers wanting to work remotely and meet remotely, but at the same time, we have those customers that love that person-to-person interaction, especially deposit-only customers that love to come to branches still. And that's something our bank has always been prideful on, is the number of locations, but we've got to be careful on reopening those locations and how we do it. So I personally see a shift over time as the virus fears can start to either go away completely or partially, that hopefully, maybe it's a hope for me too, I guess, that we'll get back to more of this in-person that we had before. But in banking, I feel like there's always been that desire. For years, the banking industry has been anticipating, planning, and moving more to digital environments already. We've been doing more with mobile apps and online banking, virtual tellers, all sorts of stuff. To see, yes, this continuing decline in use of cash and things, but those surveys that they get on the use of cash and digital still shows that we're still a long ways away from being cashless or being full digital in banking at least. So at least in my industry, I really see that in person coming around a lot more. And then separately, I've seen also a lot here lately, an increase in surveys, just in general, as a customer, as an employee, as a business. Surveys can help. We're all kind of going through this with a lot of unknowns and how to do this. And so I think those surveys are definitely helping. As a business owner, you can take that information and help yourself plan for the next year based on what customers think you're either doing well or not doing well, what your employees think you're doing well or not doing well. So utilize surveys like several others are doing and use that in planning.
I'm glad you said that. I have a question, and you may not know the answer, but do you have any tips on the best way a business could put together a survey, what kind of questions they should be asking, or anybody on the panel if you have thoughts on that?
My personal opinion, and I'll field it quickly, is that depends on what you're asking about. If you're asking about the customer's desire, for instance, in banking to want to come indoors or to want to continue to use drive-through or virtual tellers, focus then on just your customers and try to focus in on the ones that are using your services still daily. If it's still the customer that still just they've always done digital deposits, then there's really no need to come to them. They're probably going to stick to digital. But focusing your surveys on your groups to get the best answers, I would say.
Okay. Anything to add? Okay. I just thought I'd ask. We'll go ahead and move along to the next question. Fantastic answers. I appreciate all of you. As businesses are now building their annual budgets, they're planning their spend dollars, they're calculating their revenue, where can they find information and resources about changes from the banking industry, taxes, and loan programs? So we're going to focus on Ryan Paulson and Nick as well. So Ryan Paulson, we'll start with you since we just heard from Nick.
Absolutely. So again, kind of going on the theme of this panel so far, this year, 2020, has been different from many other years. And in one of those ways, there have been a lot of new programs that have come about in regards to loans. Some of these are forgivable loans, some of them are not. But through I would say starting in around March, whenever we got into this pandemic in the beginning, the government had kind of scrambled to put some programs together. And what I saw was a lot of people applying for these programs, whether it was the Paycheck Protection Program or the Economic Injury and Disaster Loan, or even, those are on the federal level, but even some state level programs as well. And one thing that I really want people to think about is if you did take part in one of these programs, and you successfully were funded through this, there are some requirements on the back end. For instance, with the Paycheck Protection Program, there's a lot of tracking that has to be done with that, and in order to get this loan forgiven, you have to be able to provide proof of what the money was used for, and track that money to be able to prove that it was used for payroll and other business expenses. And so, there are some good resources out there. I talk about this a lot with our clients, but you can go to, IRS.gov for one, has a lot of information on these, and SBA.gov has specifically about the loan programs. But on the state level, okcommerce.gov/COVID-19 is on the state level, and there's some programs there that are available just for Oklahomans and Oklahoma businesses. Some of those are grants, some of those are loans, but all three of those places, I'll mention one more time, IRS.gov, SBA.gov, and okcommerce.gov/COVID-19 are three good places to go to look into some of these programs and get some details on them.
Thank you, Ryan. And in addition to that, I'll be sharing that with the group afterward, since you mentioned them, and that might be helpful as well. So be on the lookout for that. Nick, do you have anything to add on that? I'm sure you do. There's a lot going on with loan programs, and businesses need that information.
There is a lot. Ryan did cover a lot. I will say too, during the pandemic and all these programs that were going on, whether it was big businesses who you would expect to have CPAs or accountants working for them, or small business, the CPA group really came out and started helping their clients, their people, along with us, and they were able to provide tons of information that helped the processes, because like Ryan was saying, you don't just need to just start applying if you don't know all the facts about it. It's hard to get all the information, so they trusted a lot of their advisors, and it then would get them to us to get it all completed properly. So thank the accountants for that. But yeah, there is just a ton of information out there. I know for us, what I would suggest is seek, especially if you've gotten one of these disaster aid loans, seek the advice of your banker or of your bank. I know for our vest, we put together and post on a blog information that we share, and it's coincidentally it's the website share.ourvest.com, and it can be accessed by non-customers or customers alike. But all of the current vital information related to pandemic stuff is placed at the top. It's kept current, stayed up there so people can click and find out where to get certain information from, links to other websites and things like that. There's also tips, tutorials, videos, and it sounds like I'm just hyping this Arvest product, but there's many banks that have this that's, again, available to non-customers and customers alike. And so I would seek that information out first, because you can trust it and you know who it's coming from. But again, you got to be your own advocate, so don't be afraid to research that stuff on yourself first. I think a lot of people rely on that information you push to them, and go seek that. Local papers, of course, there's a lot of good information, local news. But the other thing that's been very difficult has been the incidence of fraud throughout all of this. I know there was a lot of unemployment fraud. There's been SBA, the PPP and EIDL loan fraud. So continue to be diligent in monitoring your personal information. Make sure that it hasn't gotten in the wrong hands, because even a business loan can be opened in a personal name through the SBA and such. So be aware of all that and just be patient. If you do have an instance of fraud, get it reported through the proper channels, but be patient, because there's so many of them right now.
I appreciate you saying that. I know that we have seen kind of an influx of that nationally, and unfortunately, it is what it is. So I think you're a great in reminding people that we just need to be diligent about protecting ourselves and our businesses and what that looks like. So thank you. Moving along to our next question, unless you guys have anything to add. Most businesses went remote. BBB is not unlike that. Our team went remote for a while, and so that was an experience. We added virtual elements to our businesses, and many businesses did in 2020. So this question really is for Ryan with Standards IT. What steps can a business take to keep their data safe? We know how important that is. Provide reliable technology for their employees. I think that's something that a lot of us forgot. Well, going into the pandemic, you couldn't even buy this technology, right? And so it was hard to come by. So that, and then ensure employees have access to files and tools for working remotely. Take it away.
Yeah, so we've obviously noticed a spike, just like with the fraud in the application process for loans, in phishing attempts and other ways of trying to break into systems. So there's a lot of tools out there that have been developed. They're a little tougher to get and do some research on, but anomaly-based antivirus software, which looks at just abnormal ways that your environment is operating, versus just regular signature-based software that's going to be looking for known hashes that are identified as viruses, is one way. Specialists that can come in and evaluate your environment to see how secure you are is one way to keep things safe. We've had a big shift to multi-factor authentication. I think everybody's getting used to having to put in codes from their phones that they're texted, or they're using apps. There's multi-factor authentication apps that you can get. Backups, obviously, are always going to be number one, to make sure that if you do have something happen, you can recover. Increasing your IT budget in this uncertain world we're living in, and the shifts that we're having, IT has always been somewhat of a cost factor. Looking at it differently and thinking of how it's supporting your business now that you're outside of the office and working remotely is definitely a thing to think about, and bringing in technology experts that can help support you with your efforts, help you shift with the shifts in the business procedures that we're doing. introducing change iteratively. With the amount of change that's happening, it's a little harder to digest for people that are used to doing things a certain way. Like you said, can't do things the same way we've always done it. So having people that can help do that in a way that people can understand it and use it properly is always been helpful for us. Otherwise, you can get overwhelmed, and it's kind of tough to just do your job, and that makes things run slower and harder. Reliability is not always the ability to use new technology as much as it is to know how to use it. So that's one of the things I've kind of adopted this year is the fact that just putting new tools in and new technologies in is not going to be the solution, but making sure that people understand it is always going to be more important than that. So, and then there's plenty of cloud file servers out there to move to if you're still hosting your files internally. Having the right people that can design, implement, secure, and teach people how to use those is what we spend a lot of our time doing right now. So those are the things that I have spent most of my time helping my staff understand how to help our clients with.
So I have a follow-up question to that.
Okay.
You mentioned helping your clients understand how to use the technology. So what does that look like as far as your team providing training, or even internally, how can a business kind of train their team on what that looks like and using that technology effectively?
Yeah, it's been tough this year because we usually do things in person, and in-person training I've always found is always a better form of communication. But we use our own tools to be in front of folks and just going through the struggles with them. We're learning the new tools as well as fast as we can. They're always changing. We even have to learn them just like the rest of the people that we're teaching. So sometimes we're learning with people, but most of all, just being a part of the struggles and finding out how to solve them together. We found that the best way to do that is just to constantly be available, to always work as closely as possible, plan each week. But training is always something we try to do with them. And there's plenty of training videos on tools. They're kind of not personal, so they're there and they're valuable. But we try to do those with our clients and make sure that they understand by showing us that they know how to use the tools.
So my hat goes off to the IT world this year. You guys have worked so hard, and keeping up with that technology is not something I would want to do other than just trying to make my stuff works great. But thank you. We appreciate all the work that you've done this year to keep us current. So moving along, what characteristics, and this kind of I think piggybacks off of the first question, so we'll just kind of unpack this a little bit more. What characteristics does a successful 2021 business plan have? But alternatively, where could businesses really fail in that plan? What are important steps that we might forget to analyze? And be thinking of the fact that, I think all of us are thinking about digital and like going online. That being said, we still have to keep our doors open and find other ways to interact with our consumers. So I think I want to hear from everybody on this question. We'll start with Ryan Polston.
Yeah, so I think that kind of building off of that first question, one thing that I see a lot with my clients is more than I would like to is them not having a good idea of where they're already at. And what I mean by that is their tracking of their business, their books exactly are not caught up, or they don't have books, or not everything's in there. And really, to get an idea of where you're going, you have to know where you've been and where you are. And with that being said, I think that as we're coming up on a new year, there's not a better time than now to get all that stuff caught up, to know where you're at, and that can allow you to build projections. But with those projections and forecasting, I would advise to stay on the modest side of things. We are in an unknown area, and some businesses have, like I said earlier, really skyrocketed. Others have suffered. So I think it's a good idea to look at your books, to see where you're at, know if you are more or less profitable in 2020, because sometimes that's not so easy to tell for a business if they don't have this stuff caught up. And so when we're looking at that, though, come up with reasonable, reasonable plans of action. I always like to kind of dissect them rather than a plan for all of 2021. Maybe break it down month by month or every 3 months and break it into more achievable goals that you can monitor on a regular basis. I know my team at my job likes to meet on a weekly basis and examine, where we are to target. Even if we're a long ways away, what actions, do we need to take this week and next week? And it just makes it a little more digestible. So those are some things that I think are crucial to having a good business plan for the upcoming year.
Wonderful answer. I think you're right on point with that. Not unlike you, BB is the same. I think that analyzing and planning for 2021, making these lofty goals, but then breaking them down is so important to success. So I appreciate you saying that. Nick.
Ryan said some great stuff there that I'm actually just going to build on top of. So once you've taken the look of where you're at, you can't, like you said, you can't really prepare for the future if you don't know where you're at. The thing that I often see, so that the second half of that question, what's the important steps that you forget, is that risk or that root cause analysis of what actually makes revenue change, what makes expenses change. Most of the time people just focus on general revenue and expense. They don't look at, besides a pandemic year, what else could change those things, and can I improve that or can I fix that if it's a problem? And so I think that's a great thing to take for the next year's planning. And then, as he mentioned, also some modesty. There have been some companies that have gone really well, but there's also some that haven't done as well. So I would add, even for some, just based on recent conversations I've had, maybe in your planning, prepare yourself for a possible acquisition or a merger that could occur. Unfortunately, there have been businesses suffer during this time. And so for those that they're likely just focusing on keeping the doors open, as you would say. But maybe they need to be positioning themselves to be bought or to merge for someone to help themselves survive. For those that have been flourishing, this may be an opportunity for them, because I have heard from some, for instance, an independent insurance agent that said, we're anticipating we're going to have lower premiums, which means less revenue to us. And right now our staff level's too high for that. So he's actually looking for other books of insurance business to purchase. Because then if he could purchase them, he's got the staff level already. He could hopefully increase his margins that way. So his plan's a little bit different for one of those that has flourished in the past or has prepared for something like this. So that's what I would say, just to add on to both of those, is to find those root causes, but then also have some modesty, but also if you're in that position, look for those acquisitions or mergers.
I appreciate that answer. Thank you. Brian.
Yeah, I completely agree with the evaluation of the current state of what people are doing, because everything's changed. So determining where you want to go is a little tougher now, and being able to adjust that plan consistently throughout this pandemic we're going through and determine where you want to be might be a little bit tougher. So quicker evaluations of where you're at and being able to be versatile and change what you're doing is a good opportunity for folks right now to do, because the way they've typically done business is just sometimes not possible. And when it comes to a shift, technology being a possible generator of new business, like we were talking about earlier, we were saying about a shift into online sales. So looking at new ways to use technology is what we focus on. But if there's a space to use the data you're generating consistently with the new tool sets that you bring in to analyze how well you're doing, and just put some thresholds in to put benchmarks up and determine how well you're doing is another way to determine those things.
Wonderful, thank you. I think we've got a lot of great ideas and things that we could look at. Moving along, this question is from Ryan with Polston. And so if you need a little bit longer to answer this question, that's okay, because I know there's probably a lot of information that you can give us about taxes and tax incentives. So what tax incentives should businesses be aware of in 2021?
Yeah, so this one is kind of a tough question to answer, because we are in an election year, as we had talked about earlier. And there's a little bit of uncertainty, no one really knows which way this is going to go. But we know that either way that this goes, that there will be more than likely changes to the tax code. We've heard about potential corporate tax rates either going higher or going lower. And if that is the case, that's going back to the structure of your business. If a business is currently structured as a C corporation, and their current tax rate is 21%, but that goes to 28%, it may be possibly worth looking at, moving to an S corp, or something that is, doesn't have a corporate tax rate, rather a pass-through entity. But one thing that we do have right now is this payroll tax deferral that's going on. And a lot of people are confused about it. They're not really sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing. And essentially what it is it's a 4-month 6.2% pay hike for eligible workers based on the deferral of their Social Security taxes. And essentially it goes until December 31st of 2020. And so what that means is these employees that are eligible, I believe they have to make less than $104,000 per year. It would give them a pay hike of about 6.2% through the end of this year. But what some people may not be thinking about is that those taxes, if there is no permanent cut put into place in 2021, then those taxes will have to be paid back. And so if there's been plans, our current president has said that that is the plan. However, again, we're in an election year, so depending on what happens there may or may not be a permanent cut. And if there is not, then these businesses and the individuals will be they'll have to pay this between January 1st of 2021 and April 30th of 21. And so that is something to think about, because it will affect payroll costs. If your current business plan is treating payroll as it's been this entire year, and this payroll cut, this permanent cut is not enacted, then payroll costs are going to rise in the first quarter of 2021. And if you're not prepared for that, it could be a bad thing. So it's definitely something to think about. The other thing is, I would say after the election happens, it would be wise to get in to do some year-end planning with your CPA or with your accountant. And if you don't have one, I would suggest getting one. And definitely trying to be proactive. Like I mentioned earlier, people tend to really be reactive to taxes. They just want to make sure that they're filed, make sure that all their boxes are checked. But we really want to be a lot more proactive than that, and look at are we doing anything? Can we pay for some certain expenses in a different way that is more tax friendly? Are there any changes from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was enacted a few years ago that we're not taking advantage of now? So I know we're talking about planning during this panel, and taxes, they really need to be planned for. Right now, it's a little tough to plan for just because we do know that the tax code will change one way or the other. But regardless, there is some planning that can be done. So I would advise definitely to meet with your CPA or accountant.
Thank you. I want to ask you a follow-up question. You may or may not, but I'm going to go ahead and ask anyway. Mm-hmm. Since that is going into effect, that payroll cut you talked about January to April, is there anything the business can do now, between now and the end of the year, to kind of prep for that? Do you have any ideas? So the businesses have the ability to, it's kind of odd, but you have the ability to participate in this or not participate in this. And so, but the problem is that, it's not up to the workers themselves. The workers are the ones who are going to receive this pay hike. And essentially, like I said earlier, it has to be eligible, you have to be making less than $104,000 per year. But as a business owner, this would already be into effect right now, but it would have been very smart to talk to the employees to see how they feel about it. Some of them may really want this, it may be very helpful to them, but they need to know that, there is risk involved, because, while it is planned that there will be a permanent cut, that's not guaranteed, and we can't make a business plan based on speculation. And so we have to go with the facts that are here now. So if you are currently utilizing this payroll tax deferral, kind of piggybacking off of what I had mentioned earlier, just make sure, I would say, even if you're confident that this payroll tax cut, permanent cut will go into effect, I would go ahead and plan as though it's not going to happen, just to make sure the funds are there. And in the best case scenario, you have some extra money in your payroll account, and no one would complain about that. I love that. That's a big thing that we do here at BUB. We have a plan A, a plan B, and then a plan C, and I think that will be crucial for businesses' success in 21. So great answer. Thank you. Moving along to our next question. We have this and one more question, and we still have some time, so we might do a couple more follow-up questions before we open up the room for Q&A. What resources can businesses connect to from the banking industry when evaluating cash flow and lines of credit for financial planning? Nick, this is all you.
This is all me. All right. Well, for cash flow and lines of credit, actually Ryan from Polston mentioned earlier, the SBA.gov is a great website for the Small Business Administration's, just tons of information though, so prepare yourself. One of the first tabs on the website is Business Guide, is what it says, and it provides resources for planning, launching, managing, growing, all sorts of business aspects that you need to consider for your business. And again, I can understand it's a lot of information, and a lot of that information may be very new or foreign to a lot of people, but still, if you don't know much about it, familiarize yourselves with it and the information provided, because it's a great base of information for business managers and business owners. And also, it gives you a great insight into what banks are looking at whenever they're underwriting a loan request. Whether you have, a lot of people think they have to have an SBA loan request to have this SBA information, but it's not really like that. The information they provide can be used in either an SBA request or a conventional commercial loan request. So just familiarize yourself with a lot of that information and prepare yourself too as much as you can before you seek out a loan request for cash flow needs or lines of credit from a banker. The more the banker sees that you have planned and prepared and that you know what you're needing, the more, I guess, you increase your chances of approval and acceptance of that. As a supplement to the SBA's information, there is a nonprofit organization called SCORE, S-C-O-R-E. It's an acronym, I think. I can't remember what it stands for. But they are a resource partner of the SBA, and because of funding from the SBA and volunteers, they can provide most of their offerings for free or no cost or low cost. They provide mentoring, webinars, courses online, and a library of other online courses and resources, as well as local events. I don't know what their local events have looked like lately, but I have not used their website before, but a lot of our small business lenders with Arvest have referred customers to SCORE, and their website for the local chapter is oklahomacity.score.org, and you can get more information there. And then lastly, as kind of like with SCORE, with the pandemic, there has been a huge increase in online learning modules, both free and for a fee, that we have seen that have been posted. So after you check out the SBA and the SCORE resources, I would encourage you to see what financial ratios are the most important for your business to track based on your industry. For instance, if you're a service company, you'll likely need to look at ratios such as liquidity ratios and accounts receivable turnover. Whereas if you're a manufacturer, you may need to look at inventory turnover or work in process ratios. Once you've identified the key ratios, again, that may be foreign to you, but you at least know the name, seek out the online learning and engage in it to teach yourself and become aware of those. It goes back to the planning side that Ryan from Polston mentioned. You don't know where you're going unless you know where you're at right now. So at least get that base knowledge of what's specific to your company industry so that you can focus on that cash flow and lines of credit needs for the future.
Fantastic. For me, a lot of that sounds very foreign, but I appreciate all the resources that I can go look at. And again, we will be sharing those with everybody from the event today, so thank you so much. This is one of my favorite questions to ask. I often ask this on any of the panels that we do because I love processes and making things better. So how can a business track their successes? How do you see it through, and how do you evaluate and shift the plan as needed or appropriate? And I don't think I elaborated on that part, but throughout the year, because I think that maybe a business wasn't used to reevaluating and changing, but this year, if you didn't, then you weren't making the cut. So ideas on how do we track how successful our business is doing throughout the year, how do we change things up when we need to, and just be ready to do so. So this is a question for everybody. Ryan, we'll start with you. I'm sure you've had a lot of change this year.
We have. We found that the best way to handle and track success is through the use of business intelligence and analytics. Evaluation of that, we use project management, and we just continually meet with clients to discuss where we're at on projects, to reprioritize if need be. And we base that off of the data that we collect about their environment. We teach them how to collect data about their environment that makes sense to them. Business intelligence is a big word, and data is always something that people struggle with. And having it mean something is even the harder part. So if you can't understand or make meaning of what you're looking at, then it's just numbers on a screen. So we work with folks and do surveys to determine if we're successful in providing them information that they're looking for, and help them look at their business through the data side of what they generate. And other than that, we spend a lot of time just working with people to help them understand that things are going to change and the technologies that are coming in are going to change. And how are we going to analyze that? How are we going to determine we've made good progress on analyzing what they've already done, but what we're going to bring in now, how we're going to grow through all the things that are happening, how are we going to analyze that information, and how is it going to complement what we've already done? So just continually having an effort and keeping that in front of our clients are what we spend a lot of time doing.
Great. Fantastic. Ryan Paulson.
Yes, and thank you. Ryan had shared a lot of good information as well there. With this year, being different, this is a common theme in this panel. I think a good place to start on this is to foster a culture of adaptability. Everybody who is involved in these in the planning stage of things, we all have to understand that you have to be able to adapt to be able to make it in the current climate that we're in. And what we've done at our company is we kind of spoke on this earlier, but we really like to keep in very constant communication. We have in the beginning of this pandemic, for instance, we were meeting not only every week, but every single day. First thing in the morning, 8 a.m., everybody was on this call. And we really wanted to make sure that we weren't losing sight of what our original intentions were. Because sometimes it can be easy to get off track. You set a plan in the beginning, and then as it gets going, it can turn into something different. And so making sure that all of our team was on the same page and that we were staying true to the intentions of this plan, and also having the flexibility to be able to adapt that plan as needed, because this is all brand new to us. This for all of us. We're having to figure this out together. There's no rule book or handbook on how to do this, and so through this, I believe that we've been able to our firm, for instance, did have to kind of pivot and change things around with having everybody go remote. But by staying in constant communication and having the willingness from all of our employees to be able to pivot and to be able to adapt really made it a lot easier. And I believe that through that process has strengthened us as a company. Right now we are still meeting on not necessarily on a daily basis, but every couple of days, at least every week, to make sure that we are still staying true to that original plan and coming up with new plans for the following year. We are in this uneven, kind of an odd time. We're not sure when exactly we will be, when we're going to be back into not a non-pandemic year, I guess. We're not sure if 2021 is going to look like 2020 or not. So that we know that we have to be able to adapt whichever way it goes. So not just having one plan, but having plan A, B, and C, and being able to transition those as they're needed is a very important thing. And lastly, as I mentioned, just staying in good communication with all parties involved. I found that whenever everyone's not on the same page, it's very difficult to execute a plan. And so by keeping everybody on the same page and hearing the input from everybody, it allows an organization as a whole to move in the direction that we want to. So thank you.
Great answer. And Olson has done a fantastic job with that, I know, this year, so I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm going to add on to both of those. Both great answers. Ryan with Polston, it's a part of planning, performing, evaluating, and then either maintaining or repairing. And even for the companies that have flourished, they have changed a lot. And so that maintaining may still require a lot of change. So you've got to keep looking at that. Ryan from Standards IT, I agree with him too on the data analytics, especially. Of course, being a banker, I'm a huge data guy. But I think that can really help a business, not just in a pandemic year, planning for the next years, but any time, is looking at silos within your company. That's how I look at myself. That's how you're answering your question, performance and evaluating and ongoing successes. I look at myself first as a silo, my team that I manage, and then our impacts on the organization as well. So say you're a service company, a plumber, and your business is actually split up between commercial and residential. Most will probably just look at the numbers of their overall general plumbing business. But if you look deeper into, again, this goes back to my root cause analysis, if you look deeper into those separate silos of business, commercial versus residential, one may be worse off or hurting you more than the other. Or both are doing great. You just never know. But using data analytics and using that information to your benefit is crucial. So again, for myself, that's how I do those things. You look at not only your plan, and generally our plan's set for the whole year, but you're still going to try to work towards those goals and those plans. But look at yourself individually. Don't just encourage your staff and your employees to look at themselves like that. I look at myself first as an expense, not as someone that's a salary just getting paid to do a job. I'm an expense first. What do I need to do to cover that expense? What continued revenue stream do I need to make? What referrals do I need to make internally or externally to people I know? I need to send customers to Ryan for tax services or to other Ryan for IT services so I can ensure that I'm going to get referrals back, hopefully from them, for trusted services in the future. So continuing to look at all those things is one, just several ways to keep track of your successes and going forward. Just stick with those plans, and if you have to modify, which you probably have, modify, but then keep going.
Fantastic. I have another follow-up question, and this is for anybody to answer Alan too, but I'm going to pick on Ryan with Polston first. You had mentioned pivoting and how important that is. So as your organizations individually have pivoted in the pandemic, what has worked and maybe what didn't work? What learnings can you share with our other organizations on this call today?
Yes, so we most certainly did pivot. We went from being in our offices, every one of us full time, no one really working remote at all, to within about 7 days being a fully remote organization. And you don't realize how much help you get just from other coworkers, just asking a quick question, or how much you really get out of just working next to somebody. And so I think that in the beginning, this was all new to us, and so we didn't have a ton of formal training on some of the, specifically, with what Ryan could help with the technology. We didn't we had some training, but not necessarily. It wasn't as though every single person was exactly familiar with how this was going to work, and they couldn't just walk over to their coworker's desk and say, "Hey, how do you do this?" And so by for one, building a plan, but being able to be flexible with that plan and adjust it as needed. With our IT people, we ended up changing some things, and we planned to have them more available outside of even normal business hours so that they could communicate with us and fix everyone's problem on an individual basis. And, I'm trying to think of some things that didn't work. I would say that being very well thought out and very strategic in how we went about this, we did it in phases. So we didn't just make everybody go straight to home in one day. We did it incrementally to ensure that was working well, and then we did another phase of it. And that worked well for us. We didn't have to commit to this big, huge, sweeping change all at once. We did it quickly, but we did it strategically. And that played out very well for us. But there was additional challenges that came up. We had to become a lot more flexible with our employees' time. If their children were not going to school anymore, and they really can't even go to daycare, it may not be very possible for them to work during their normal business hours. And so in the beginning, we kind of wanted to keep it, as it is, normal business hours. But we later found out that if we can be flexible with some people, on an individual basis, they can prove their own value even more than they're able to if we put these restrictions on them. So we gave a lot of trust to our employees, and that worked out very well for us. And kind of just on an individual basis, figured out what works for them. And so far, it's gone very well. So, yeah.
Fantastic answer. I appreciate that. Nick or Ryan, do you have anything to add to that? What has your organization done to pivot? What worked and what didn't?
I've got a couple things I can add. As Ryan from Polston mentioned, they were very strategic, and we were fortunately able to be that as well. If you're a larger business, you 50 or more employees, you probably now have a pandemic committee, and you use that committee and you were making thoughtful steps. And that's what we did as an organization. It was the pivot. Yeah, we had to be quick, but we also were sticking to what we knew, what our committees knew, what our leaders knew, and before making those changes, because like the whole rest of the world, we were still trying to figure this all out at the same time. To some customers, maybe they didn't like some of the moves we were doing. To others, they appreciated what we were doing because we were maybe keeping them safer. We don't know. So for restaurants, for all these other businesses that, dental offices, medical offices, what I would recommend as that pivot is to be strategic and stick with your convictions. Stick with what you know when you're making those decisions. Don't just make it because someone out there else is doing something.
Fantastic. Brian, anything to add? If not, I have another question for you after.
I'll make my answer short. We've had to pivot with all of our clients. We work with small businesses, so their shift in this time, we help clients. We're using the technologies that we've been trying to help clients move to that have had some resistance, but there's not resistance anymore. So the pivot for us has been just to keep up with everybody's shift because we depend on what our clients are doing and where they're going. So shifting to their needs and the speeds that they want to do it has been how we've had to pivot. And it's been tough to keep up, but and we've had some struggles with keeping up, but we've found ways to make it happen.
Great answer. You had mentioned earlier in one of your answers, and so I wanted to unpack this a little bit more about learning new tools and finding ways to train your clients and all of those things. Do you have any tools you would recommend using for business? I mean, any ideas on things that they could utilize in this remote workforce?
We use a lot of Microsoft products. We're heavily into teaching people Teams. It integrates with a lot of the other tools that we implement with the analytics process and with the OneNote process. It just depends on how people operate. We kind of pivot because a lot of people use different tools. So the tools we have to learn as being a part of their team is what we teach. So we'll learn their environments and help them teach their tools. So as for the shift and the way that we've had and we've recommended tools, Microsoft Teams has been a big competitor to the Zoom shift. It's built into a lot of the other products. So those would be probably the biggest products I would recommend would be the whole Microsoft suite.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, we are now going to open for questions. Okay, yeah, I do have another one for Nick. You had mentioned consumers and businesses being able to access a lot of tools for the banking industry online. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Tools that are accessible, easy to find, that might be helpful as we're doing 2021 planning?
Yeah, I can actually. So another thing that I've come across during this pandemic, working remotely, I watch a ton of CNBC now. But just signing up, and not signing up, but watching CNBC, there was a lot of information about pandemic relief efforts in banking and loans in general that were available. A lot of the talks about tax changes and things like that are discussed on channels and media outlets like that. And the other thing, and this relates, I think, to banking, but all industries. There was a desire by many of us, because we switched so quickly to video conferencing and phone calls. Well, you can still keep in touch with your network of people that way. Do not forget your network of people. Stay in contact with them. Maybe they know what other information is going on out there. I mean, I even talked to a guy during the pandemic who knew that there's a Facebook group of escape room owners. And it's thousands of them across America in a Facebook group. And so these escape room owners here locally and nationwide are talking about what they need to do. And I learned a bunch from that guy, because he was hearing all these things that were going on. So keep that network really flowing and you can get tons of information that way.
Fantastic. So I have another question for Ryan with Polston, and I just know that Polston does this so well. You all do a lot of networking and community partnerships, and we've been so fortunate to be able to partner with you and partner with businesses on LinkedIn. Do you have any tips for businesses going to the new year about that, how to form those partnerships and how that might help their planning?
I do. We are fortunate to have a business development team that is just incredible. And, I do meet with a lot of businesses, mostly small to medium size. And I would say, if you have employees, or even if let me back up. If you're a smaller business, even like an owner operator, if you're not currently spending time, dedicated to networking and business development, you probably should consider it. A lot of businesses now get most of their business from referrals, and being plugged into that network can be a very valuable thing. And not only does it, bring value to, not only does it bring value to your clients, but whenever I can place my client into Ryan's hands or into Nick's hands and know that they're going to be taken care of, that adds value to me as well. And so it's not just about getting referrals inbound, but being able to give them as well. And if your business is larger or medium size to larger size, and you don't have some sort of business development employees or team in place, it's worth looking into, absolutely. And for us, it keeps us in the know. It gives us a lot of opportunities that we otherwise would not have, and it gives us the ability to do these partnerships and kind of further our network. At this point, if my client needs something, even if I can't do it, chances are I know someone not only who can do it, but somebody that I trust who can do it. So that again makes me valuable even more so to my clients. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. I know that I was kind of throwing that out there and just thought you might have something to add, so I appreciate that. Nick or Ryan, anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. Since we didn't, we did have a question for that. Okay. Question to all. What communication tools have you been using internally and externally during this time?
Well, so Ryan from Standards has said, he keeps talking about Teams, and Teams has been a game changer for us. We actually switched to Teams in the beginning of the pandemic from I can't remember what we used before that, but it's enabled us to be able to stay in quick communication at all times, and I can get it on my phone. I travel from all of our different locations, and so even if I'm on the road, my car will play the Teams message on my dashboard, and I can respond to it, which is a blessing and a curse sometimes, but it makes communication easy. Also, I'm used to doing in-person meetings a lot, but just as we're doing right now, virtual meetings are kind of the new norm, and so I've used Zoom and WebEx, various different, even Skype virtual meeting things as well. So those are the main things that we're using.
Any other communication tools, Brian?
I'll say we have Microsoft Teams, but we're not fully integrated yet. But I've got a lot of accountant friends, whether they're smaller firms or some of the big four firms that just love Microsoft Teams. I hate for this to be a plug for it, but and I trust their opinion, a lot of their usage of it, the way they're able to organize files and communicate. So I hope that we get to do something like that in the future. But I will say this about us. Zoom has, of course, become very popular. And for me, I feel like it's actually even made it better. Some of our committees that we had would meet by phone before the pandemic. And I'd much rather do a video conference than a phone conference nowadays. It's just a lot better to get a little bit of that personal interaction with people. So that's what we use a lot of.
Yeah, unless I'm working from home and in my PJs, but that's
Right.
a whole different story. Ryan, anything to add to that? Any tools, communication tools your team is using?
Well, Ryan hit on most of them, but there are tools that you can get that if you have an office and an office phone system that integrate with phones for your app, or apps for your phone. So other than Teams and tools like WebEx and Skype and Zoom, there are other phone systems that will allow you to download apps and do communication well and have conferences through the tools that are in the offices that you're in. So.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was going to add on to that question was more towards us, what our businesses have done internally, but externally, there's other things too, like Ryan Standards had mentioned too, that you can do. I know like for our bank, we've added in an online scheduling tool. So customers who maybe want to come in, but they want a specific time to come in, or they want a specific time to call, they can go online, they can access my calendar availability or anybody's calendar availability. And so that's just another communication tool. I know it's a scheduling tool, but it's really a communication tool because it's these people are explaining what they want to talk about. Here's my number, and here's the time I'd like to do that. So there's so many neat new things that have been added to help the communication piece, both internally and externally.
I think a lot of people are taking advantage of those. For instance, people are using Facebook Live. It's a one-way communication, except for with the comments. But there's a lot of ways to communicate. I would just say make sure that you're communicating properly and setting things up properly and understanding the tools. But there are a lot of ways to communicate through technology.
Thank you. We don't have any other questions at this time, so I'm going to open it up to you all. Do you have anything else you want to unpack, talk about? Any more last-minute tips before we wrap up?
I've got one thing that I did want to kind of mention. I didn't know if I could work it in here, but the one thing I meet personally with almost exclusively with business owners, as I think all three of us here meet with a lot of business owners. One, I always throw this out there as a tax strategy to think about and consider, and it's kind of a fun thing to do. So there is a tax strategy we call the Augusta loophole, and we essentially what it allows you to do is if you are a business owner and you are also a homeowner, you own your home and you own your business. Under the current tax code, since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, if you ever use your house, I have so many businesses that use small businesses that use their home as a meeting place. I know right now they may not be doing that with the pandemic, but they may have company cookouts or company parties. And what you can do, the current tax code will allow a person, an individual, to lease their home as long as it's within a fair market value to a business or to another person. And if they do that less than 13 times in a year, it's not considered taxable income. And so what that means is if I own a business and I'm going to have a company cookout at my house, I can charge my business, let's say $300 to rent my house. As long as I do that 13 times or less in a year, then the business can pay me for that individually. The business takes that as a deduction, and then it's not taxable income for me personally. And so I'm shifting not a lot of money, but some money out of my business to me personally, completely tax-free. They call it the Augusta loophole because the Masters is played in Augusta, the golf tournament. And the people who live in the neighborhood at Augusta National lease out their homes to spectators and to the tour players as well. And that's kind of how it got its name. But it's a missed opportunity that I see a lot. People already are using their homes for various things with their business. And it's just another benefit that they can use and kind of save a little bit on taxes. So just wanted to mention.
Very interesting. How can I send some information to our guests about that?
It's going to be a lot of opinion pieces, but you can simply just put, Google search Augusta loophole. I will try to pin something. I'll find a good solid resource. There's not really a specific website I can tell you, but if you do Google even that term, you'll find several different pieces of people talking about it and explaining how it works. But again, it is important to research that before you do it because there are some specific guidelines that you have to stay within to make sure that it'll work. So
wonderful, thank you. Anything else?
I was going to add, Ryan with Standards IT earlier mentioned about overstaffing to cover for staff sicknesses. Mm-hmm. I think as a consumer or a buyer of goods too, I appreciate businesses that do that because if you need to shut down a location to sanitize, hey, great, I'll wait, and you need to shift those people to another location you have to work elsewhere. You're planning. I appreciate that kind of stuff. So as a consumer, I like that you mentioned that, and I think that's something businesses should really consider.
I do too. And I know that your team teams have gone through that personally, and so it's not something, again, for me, not leading an organization, it's not something I would have ever thought about, so I appreciate that. So we're now just going to go ahead and wrap up. So people in the room, we've only got a few, we're going to clap for our panelists and say thank you so much for joining us today. As promised, I am going to follow up with some of the resources provided by our panelists today, just some additional information, maybe some information about that tax Augusta loop, is that what you call it?
Augusta loophole,
Okay,
yes.
Augusta loophole that I can share with you all, and tools and resources to help you plan for your 2021 year. If you got any questions following up from that, feel free to reply to that email that I'll send out. But we were so excited to have you. Thank you for joining us. And we're excited to have you join us for our 2021 series. Have a wonderful afternoon.